Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar about Construction Industry Scheme for Contractors. My name is Vanette, and I'll be co-presenting the webinar today with Graham. The webinar will last for around an hour. The information you will be receiving today is correct at the time of delivery, which is the 9th of November 2023. Guidance is updated regularly, so we advise you to refer to gov.uk for regular updates. So I'll start by explaining how to use the control panel and ask questions. If you're watching on a PC, laptop or Mac, you'll have a control panel like the one shown on the screen now. Near the top of the control panel in the audio box, you'll see the red muted message. Everyone's microphone is muted so that you can hear the presenters clearly. You can adjust the sound from this audio box. There is a message at the top right-hand side of the screen for anyone who can't hear me. You can usually fix audio problems if you select the phone call button, then make sure you go back and select the computer audio button again. If this doesn't solve the problem, close the webinar and log back in. Halfway down the control panel, there is a handouts box. The handouts will include links to the information being covered in the webinar today. You can download these during the webinar. They are in two formats, Word and PDF, so please download in whichever format you prefer. There is a question and answer box near the bottom of the panel. Type your question in the box and then send. You can make the question box bigger by selecting the symbol at the top right of the question box. You can then resize the box. Before you leave the webinar, you can choose to save the question and answer log. PC or laptop users, on the control panel, select File at the top left-hand corner of the control panel and then Save Questions log. Mac users, on the GoToMeeting toolbar, select File and Save Message log. I will show you this again at the end of the webinar. A link to a recording of the webinar plus useful links will be sent via email to you within a couple of days. If you're joining us on a phone or tablet, you may see a toolbar instead of the control panel. In that case, tap on the question mark to ask a question. You should take a screenshot to save answers. We suggest you do this as you go along, as you will not be able to save the question and answer log on a mobile device. Tap on the document icon to download the handouts. The icon should already have appeared, as the handouts are available for you to download. If you are unable to download the handouts, the links will be included in the follow-up email you will receive in a few days. We have colleagues in the background answering your questions during the webinar using the control panel question and answer box. They will aim to answer as many of your questions as they can today, but may not be able to reply to them all. Please note that we're unable to answer questions specific to individual circumstances. So for that reason, can we ask that you don't post any personal information in the question box? Finally, if we have any groups of attendees today, could I ask you to use the question box to tell us how many additional people are taking part? So for example, if there are 3 of you taking part as a group, then please type 2 in the question box. Okay, thank you so much for providing us with that additional information. So we'll now start the main presentation. And during today's webinar, we'll refer to the construction industry scheme as CIS. We'll be looking at an introduction to the scheme, as well as employment status, registering with HMRC and how to use the business tax account, verification and deductions, CIS returns, and paying HMRC. This presentation is a basic outline and may not cover everything you need to know. There is a lot more information on the gov.uk website. So what is CIS? CIS sets out the rules for how contractors make payments to subcontractors for construction work. The scheme includes any work done to a permanent building, temporary structure, or civil engineering work. It covers building things, making things, putting things together, and assembling things. It doesn't normally cover private households who get work done for their own house or have a new house built for them. If you want to check if the work you're doing is covered by this scheme, there is more information in the CIS 340 on the gov.uk website, and there's a link to this in the handouts. So let's look at some important terms used in CIS. Contractors can be self-employed individuals, partnerships, or companies. They pay subcontractors for work carried out within the scheme. If you work in domestic households and use subcontractors to carry out construction work, you are a CIS contractor. If you never use other workers, you are not a contractor. Under CIS, a subcontractor agrees to do work for a contractor. Like contractors, they can be a self-employed individual, a partnership, or a company. It doesn't matter how they carry out the work. They can do it themselves, get employees to do it, use their own subcontractors, or make some other arrangement. A deduction is the amount a contractor has to take from a payment made to a subcontractor towards the subcontractor's tax and national insurance bill. A payment is anything paid by the contractor to the subcontractor, and this can include cash, checks, an advance, or a loan. A contract is a legally binding agreement where one business does work or provides services for another. A contract includes a word of mouth agreement, a written agreement, or it can be implied. Let's have a look at an overview of what you need to do as a contractor. You need to check whether your contracts create employment or self-employment. This is known as employment status. Once you have subcontractors, you need to register as a contractor with HMRC. The easiest way to register is online. You may need to verify your subcontractors with HMRC. The easiest way to do this is online. You pay your subcontractors and make deductions where required. You need to give your subcontractors a payment and deduction statement if you've made a deduction from their payment. You need to send any deductions and a monthly return to HMRC, and it's very important that you keep records. We'll now take you through the process in more detail. You can find more information about the rules you must follow as a contractor on gov.uk, and there is a link in the handout. And now we'll have a look at the first polling question for today. So this is where you can take part in the webinar by selecting one of a choice of answers. No one else can see your individual reply, but we'll all be able to see the overall result as a percentage of the total replies. And I'll show you this on the screen after the poll has closed. Your answers are useful feedback for us, so please get involved if you can. And I will now just launch that first polling question on the screen for you now. Okay, you should be able to see that question on screen now, which is, how should a contractor treat a worker? So please select one from as a trading business, as an employee, or it depends on the terms of the contract, or you're not sure. I'll just give you a few moments to put your responses through, and then once the voting has slowed down, I will then close the poll and then share the results. And I will also let you know what the correct answer is for your reference. Thank you. Okay, the voting have slowed down now, so I'm just going to close the poll and then share the results with you. So the results on how you voted is now shown on screen, so thank you so much for taking part. And just to let you know, the correct answer is, it depends on the terms of the contract. So I will now hide this information from the screen. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Graham to continue. So good morning to you, Graham.
Yeah, good morning to you as well, Vinette, and good morning and a warm welcome from myself to everyone who's joined us on this webinar today. So sometimes contractors and subcontractors may work in a chain, and here's an example. ADD Buildings is a contractor and asks Tony to do the brickwork and plastering as a subcontractor. There is some plumbing work to do as well, so Tony asks Erica to do this work. Therefore, Erica becomes a subcontractor to Tony. So let's just recap. ADD Buildings is a contractor, Erica is a subcontractor, and Tony Pickering is in the middle and is both a contractor and a subcontractor. He is a subcontractor to ADD Buildings and a contractor to Erica. So we'll follow Tony to find out what he needs to do now he's taken on his first subcontractor. And we'll now take you through the SIS scheme in more detail. When you have a contract for work or services within SIS, does it create employment or self-employment? This is important because it affects the tax and national insurance of the people you pay as a contractor. Each contract or terms and conditions you have with others can create employment or self-employment. It's not a matter of choice. This applies if the worker is full-time, part-time or casual. It's your responsibility as the contractor to check if your workers are employed or self-employed for the work that they're going to do for you. If you want to check if any contract creates employment or self-employment, it's a good idea to check the employment status for tax, and you can do this on the gov.uk website. Here, as the contractor, it's Tony's responsibility to check if his new worker Erica is employed or self-employed for the work she's going to do. Tony does this using the employment status checker on gov.uk. Now, this is a copy of the result that Tony got. His worker Erica is self-employed. You can print a copy of the result and keep it for your records. There's no need to check the same contract again unless you change it. Letting HMRC know you've started in business is called registering. You need to register with HMRC as a contractor before you take on your first subcontractor. To register as a contractor, follow the process for setting up as a new employer. You can do this online at gov.uk, and there's a link to this in the handout provided for you today. Tony doesn't need to register as an employer with HMRC. He did that when he took on his first employee some time ago. But he does need to tell HMRC as he's become a contractor and he's taking on his first subcontractor. The easiest way to do this is online. Let's have a look at what details you need to register for CIS. The details you'll need depend on the type of business, but they'll include things like your unique taxpayer reference, and you'll have this if you've registered for self-assessment, your national insurance number, and registered business name and contact details. So what happens after you've registered? Well, HMRC will set up a contractor scheme for your business, give you an employer reference if you don't already have one, and tell you where to find the information you need. You'll be given two reference numbers, an employer's reference for monthly CIS returns and to use if you have any questions, and an accounts office reference to use when making monthly CIS payments. Once you're registered as a contractor, you'll need to sign up for CIS online to send forms and information to HMRC electronically. You can find out how to sign up to CIS online by visiting the gov.uk website. It's a good idea once you have registered as a contractor to set up your business tax account with HMRC. The business tax account is an online account which allows you to view the tax position for all of your business taxes in one place. You can add more than 40 services to your business tax account, including self-assessment, corporation tax, VAT, and PAYE for employers and CIS. And you can manage your account, check your messages online, and get help and support. In Manage Account, you can view, add, or remove a tax service. And you can view, add, or change a tax agent and authorize them to act on your behalf. And you can also view, add, or change your account details, including your business address, trading name, or contact details. If HMRC need to send you a secure message, you'll receive a notification via email, and a red notification symbol will appear in your business tax account. You can also find useful sources for help and support and contact details for HMRC on the Help and Contact page. The PAYE for Employers guidance here includes helpful links for guidance about refunds, and contact options, including the employer helpline and web chat option. If you've registered for PAYE for employers, you will also be able to use the service within your business tax account to view your balance, any tax that you owe, and your PAYE payments history. You can also use your business tax account to file monthly SIS returns, which we'll talk about later in this webinar, and also to verify subcontractors. So now you've reached the point where you're taking on subcontractors. And before paying your subcontractors, you need to verify them with HMRC. This is to make sure they have the correct rate of deduction applied to the payments you make to them under SIS. You need to do this online using the HMRC SIS service or commercial SIS software. If you have more than 50 subcontractors, it's a good idea to use commercial SIS software. And there's a list of SIS software recognised by HMRC on the gov.uk website. The HMRC SIS online service was not designed for large contractors, so you may get a timeout or error message if you try to use it. So back to our example, and now Tony has his first subcontractor, Erica, and he needs to verify her. Tony will need Erica's details, which include her name and unique taxpayer reference, her national insurance number, or if she's running a business as a company, her company registration number. It's a good idea to get these details before or as soon as a subcontractor starts working for you. Otherwise, your subcontractors may pay a higher deduction rate than they need to. It's also important to enter the information about your subcontractors correctly to make sure the verification is successful. If you make a mistake, you can amend the information before you carry on to verify. HMRC gives you a verification reference number and tells you what rate of deduction to use. Now, it's important you keep a record of these as you need them to complete your monthly SIS return. Sometimes a subcontractor can change their trading name or their business may become a limited company. And if this happens, you'll need to verify them again. A deduction is the amount you take away from payments you make to a subcontractor. Therefore, HMRC tells you either to make no deduction, and this happens when the subcontractor has applied successfully to receive gross payments, make a standard rate deduction of 20%, or make a deduction at a higher rate of 30%, where the subcontractor hasn't registered for SIS. You use the verification number and deduction rate until HMRC tells you to change. You don't need to verify a subcontractor every time they work for you, if you've included them in a SIS return in the current tax year or at any time in the 2 tax years before this one. Sometimes a subcontractor's rate of deduction can change. If it changes from gross to 20% deduction rate, HMRC will contact you, giving you 35 days notice of the change. If it changes from 20% or 30% deductions to gross, you should use this on all future payments as soon as possible. Now here, during verification, HMRC tells Tony to deduct 20% from Erica's payments. So let's have a look at how this works. And here's Erica's first payment. Erica is not registered for VAT, but she buys materials that her contractor, Tony, has agreed to repay. You always start with the amount owed to the subcontractor. Erica has labour of £400 and materials of £240, therefore totalling £640. You take away any VAT they've charged. Then you take away the amount the subcontractor paid for things like materials, any fuel used except for travelling, plant hire, and manufacturing or prefabricating materials. Make sure the costs claimed are reasonable and check that any plant hire was specifically for that job. If you don't, HMRC may ask you to pay the shortfall in deductions. Here, the only amount to take away is the materials. So the balance before deduction is £400. Finally, you apply either the 20% or the 30% rate to the amount that's left to work out the amount you need to deduct. So £400 at 20% gives a deduction of £80. This leaves a net amount of £320. Erica is therefore paid materials of £240 and the net amount of £320, making a total of £560. Don't forget, the deduction of £80 must be paid to HMRC. Tony needs to give his subcontractor Erica a payment and deduction statement. Every month, you will give a written statement to each subcontractor where you took a deduction at either 20 or 30% from them. You don't need to do this for subcontractors you've paid gross, but it is good practice to do so. You need to give the statements within 2 weeks of the end of each tax month. As each tax month runs from the 6th of one month to the 5th of the next, you'll need to provide the statement by the 19th of the month. Statements are normally issued monthly, but they can be issued for each payment made if payments are more frequent. The statement can be electronic, so long as you and the subcontractor both agree to this method, and the subcontractor must be able to store and print it. The gov.uk website has a blank form you can use as a statement. It also has useful information on how to calculate payments to subcontractors. Sometimes a statement doesn't reach the subcontractor, or it's lost or mislaid, and you may be asked for a copy. You can issue a duplicate, but clearly mark it duplicate to avoid confusion with the original in case it reappears. So at this point now, I'm going to hand back over to Vinette, who's going to take us on to the second polling question. So back to you, Vinette.
Thank you, Graham. Yes, we now have our next polling question, which I will now launch on screen. And you should be able to see that question now. And that question is, which of these are correct deduction rates? So please select one from no deduction, 10%, 30%, no deduction, 20%, 40%, or no deduction, 20%, 30%. And whilst we're waiting for you to complete the poll, I just want to do a few reminders here for you. So the first one is regarding saving the questions. If you're on a mobile device, you will need to take screenshots as you won't be able to save the question and answer log. And we do suggest that you take screenshots as you go along. Also, there is a handout for you to download during the webinar. The handout's been provided in Word and also in PDF, so please download the handout in your preferred format. And you will receive a follow-up email in the next few days, which will include a link to a recording of the webinar and useful links. Also, our colleagues will aim to answer as many of your questions as they can today, but they may not be able to reply to them all. Okay, so thank you for taking part in that poll. I am now going to close it and then share the results. So the results of how you voted is now shown on screen. So thank you so much for that. And just to let you know for your reference, the correct answer is no deduction, 20%, 30%. So I'll now hide this information from the screen and I'll move on to the next section on CIS returns. So Tony now has to send a CIS return to HMRC each month. You can send your return online using HMRC's free CIS online service, or if you have a large number of subcontractors, you can use commercial software. You can no longer send paper CIS returns. So what information do you need to put on your CIS monthly return? For every subcontractor, you will need to show their details, such as their name or trading name, and the amount you paid them before any deduction was taken from the payment, the cost of any materials that the subcontractors themselves paid for, and finally, the amount you deducted from this subcontractor. This will be shown on the statements you give your subcontractors, so it's easy to keep a record. Not all subcontractors have a deduction, as some of them may be paid gross, but you will still need to include them on your CIS return. Tony has only one subcontractor, Erica, that he needs to enter on his CIS return. So what's next? The return includes two declarations. Firstly, that your subcontractors are self-employed and not employees. Secondly, that you've verified all the subcontractors who require verification. If you didn't pay any subcontractors, you must tell HMRC. You don't have to file a return for the months when you've made no payments to subcontractors, but you must tell HMRC that no return is due. Otherwise, you may receive a penalty. The best way to do this is online by sending a nil return. You can also call the CIS helpline. If you're not paying any subcontractors for a while, let HMRC know. You can do this online by ticking the inactivity request box under the declaration section of the return. They will stop asking for monthly return forms for up to 6 months. If you've stopped trading altogether, tell HMRC as soon as possible so they can update your records. If you've made a mistake on your return, you can correct it online. You can call the CIS helpline if you need any help with this. These returns need to reach HMRC within 14 days after the end of the tax month. That means by the 19th of each month. For example, the return of all payments to subcontractors between the 6th of May and the 5th of June should reach HMRC by the 19th of June. Make sure you always get your returns to HMRC on time, or you may receive a penalty if you are late. You'll need to keep details of all information on your monthly CIS return and how you reach these figures. So you need records that include the gross amount of each payment you make, the amount of deductions from a subcontractor's statement, and the cost of materials paid by the contractor. HMRC may check these records from time to time. You need to keep your records for at least 3 years after the end of the tax year, therefore. This is different from other business records. If HMRC asks to see them, you'll need to make them available and provide any facilities HMRC need to look at them. HMRC can charge you a penalty if you don't keep accurate records, destroy your records too soon, or send a tax return that isn't correct. If you disagree with a penalty, you have 30 days to appeal. The easiest way to do this is through HMRC's online service. HMRC may accept and settle your appeal straight away, but if they can't, they will note your records to show that you've appealed. HMRC won't take any recovery action whilst reviewing your appeal, and you can track the status of your appeal online. HMRC can charge interest if you underpay your taxes. Keeping good, up-to-date records will help you filling your tax return accurately, avoid penalties, and pay only the right amount of tax. If you do make a mistake, HMRC won't charge a penalty if you can show that you took reasonable care with your tax. And keeping good records is one way of showing this. We'll take a look at paying HMRC now. You need to pay the amount deducted from subcontractors to HMRC monthly. If you've made a mistake and didn't take enough from a subcontractor, you must still pay the correct amount to HMRC. If you're paying electronically, you have 17 days after the end of the tax month for the money to reach HMRC. That means by the 22nd of the month. If you're paying in any other way, you only have 14 days. In this case, payment must reach HMRC by the 19th of the month. If you also have PAYE employees, include both subcontractors' deductions and the PAYE deducted from your employees in the payment. As a PAYE employer, you may also need to send in an Employer Payment Summary or EPS by the 19th of the month. If you are a limited company subcontractor and suffered CIS deductions, claim them back through your company's monthly payroll. Enter the total amount taken from your company's income during the tax month on your EPS. It's important to make sure the figure is accurate, but if you make a mistake, you must send an EPS with the correct year-to-date figures. You can then offset these CIS deductions against your payments to HMRC. Some payroll software may not allow a company to submit an EPS for an earlier year. In this case, you should use HMRC's basic PAYE tools instead. By reducing your payments to HMRC, you can recover your CIS deductions suffered during the tax year, so you won't have to claim a repayment for them after the end of the year. Remember, you should only declare CIS deductions suffered on your EPS if you're registered as a limited company. If you do need to claim a repayment as a limited company subcontractor after the end of the tax year, you can find out how to on gov.uk. From April 2022, you must enter your corporation tax unique tax reference, that's CTUTR or co-tax reference number, to claim credit for these deductions. If you don't know your CTUTR, you can request it from HMRC online. You can now also use an I-form. The link to the gov.uk guidance and the I-form is in the handout. We run another webinar, Getting Payroll Information Right, which will be helpful if you also have PAYE employees. And we have a webinar, Construction Industry Scheme for Subcontractors, if you're also a subcontractor. And now we'll have the final polling question. And I'll just get that question up on the screen for you now. Okay, and that question is, how long do you keep your CIS contractor records for? Please select one from 1 year, 3 years, 6 years, 10 years, or you're not sure. And then once the voting have slowed down, I will close the poll and share the results, and I will also let you know what the correct answer is for your reference. Thank you. Okay, so the voting has slowed right down now, so I'm just going to close it and then share the results with you. So the results are now shown on screen. So thank you so much for taking part in all the polls that we had for you today. And just to let you know, the correct answer is 3 years after the end of the tax year they relate to. So I will now just hide this information from screen. And I'll now hand back over to Graham to continue with the next section. So back to you, Graham.
Thank you very much, Vinette. So we are nearly at the end of the webinar now, but before we go on, I just want to say a quick word about the domestic reverse charge, which is a major change to the way VAT is collected in the building and construction industry, and which came into effect on the 1st of March 2021. Where it applies, it means that contractors will pay the VAT due on supplies from subcontractors to HMRC instead of paying the subcontractor. It will only apply to transactions between individuals or businesses registered for VAT in the UK where CIS applies. It won't apply to CIS registered consumers where they opt to use the end user or intermediary supplier exclusions. End users are VAT and CIS registered businesses that do not supply construction services themselves. Intermediaries are also VAT and CIS registered and are associated with the end user. You must use the reverse charge from the 1st of March 2021 if you're VAT registered in the UK, by building and construction services, and the payment for the supply is reported within CIS at any of the 3 rates of deduction. The supply is standard or reduced rate. You are not hiring either staff or workers. You have not opted to use the end user or intermediary exclusions and told your subcontractor in writing. There's much more information, including a webinar about the domestic reverse charge on gov.uk. Just search for VAT reverse charge for building and construction services. We are nearly at the end of the webinar now, and here's a summary of what we've covered today. we started with an introduction to CIS, then employment status, followed by registering with HMRC, verification and deductions, CIS returns, and finally paying HMRC. If you need more help, then our full range of help and guidance can be viewed online from your mobile, tablet or PC at any time. And links to further help and guidance are included in the handouts provided for you today. So at this point now, for the final time, I'm going to hand back to Vanette to issue a few reminders and then bring the webinar to a close. So back to you, Vanette.
Thank you, Graham. Yes, I'll now remind you how to save the question and answer log. So if you're using a PC or laptop and you'd like to save the questions and answers that have been shared in the question box today, select File and then Save Questions Log at the top of your control panel. You can also save the question and answers log from a Mac. On the GoToMeeting toolbar, select File and Save Questions. If using a mobile device or tablet, you need to take screenshots as you're not able to download the question and answers log. The control panel will close at the end of the webinar, so if you want to download the handouts and the question and answers log and haven't yet, we will give you time to download these at the end of the webinar. I will leave the webinar open for around 5 minutes to allow you to do this. Just to remind you that we will also send you an email including a link to a recording of the webinar and useful links within a couple of days. When the webinar has closed, you'll be directed to a short survey. Your feedback is very useful and helps us to keep developing our webinars. Please do not send in any more questions as these will not be answered in the 5 minutes that the webinar will be left open. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone involved in today's webinar, and also thank you to all of you who have attended. It will now go quiet for you to download the handouts and question log. So thank you again and goodbye for now. Goodbye.